welcome to the show today. I am here in person with a longtime friend, somebody I admire, someone that I have a great deal of respect for, and just so happens that for the past couple of years, we lived in the same town. So I want to welcome to the show my friend, my longtime friend, Todd McCullough, also known as T-Mac from T-Mac Fitness. Todd, will you just quickly introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, a little bit about what you do and your journey to getting here.
For sure. First of all, it's hilarious how we met or reconnected, right? We met at the Whole30 thing years ago, and then we're both working out randomly years later at a gym here in Nashville. And I'm like, I think that's Jason. You're like, I think that's Todd. I'm like, amazing how we reconnected all those
Crazy.
years. You didn't have enough weight on the squat rack, by the way. You could have used a little bit more weight. I'm kidding, as all I do is yoga these days. So from North Florida, small little country town, about 45 miles west of Jacksonville, kind of where those places where, college football on Saturday, Jesus on Sunday type place. And, it's funny looking back, like you are kind of the product often of your environment. And my dad had two jobs when I was a kid. One, he owned the local gym and then he ended up being a cop. My mom's a school teacher. My brother's a police officer. So kind of just grew up in that rural North Florida environment, which was amazing. Great childhood.
I hear it in the accent.
It's come a long ways, but yeah, there's a lot of inbreeding back home. Probably the good recipient of that.
I grew up in Tampa, and what's interesting about the state of Florida in general is that it's like 3 or 4 different cultures as you sort of like work from the bottom of the state up to the top. In Tampa, you weren't in the South. Like if you're not in the South, and in Miami, you're not in the South, but in North Florida, you're still in the South.
Yeah, I mean, you're still hog hunting, deer hunting, shooting squirrels all day. Like that's rabbit, that type of stuff.
Doing all that.
Yeah.
So then you were fortunate enough to be blessed with the genetics that allow you to be a pretty high caliber athlete.
The milkman. The milkman was pretty good. Yeah, it's funny. I got lucky. Like I said, college football was one of those things in our culture at that time where it was everything. And if you grew up in the South, Steve Spurrier and Florida football, the closest thing you can see to modern time would be like Nick Saban, Alabama, even though that's a whole nother, like what he's done is incredible. But in that culture, like Steve Spurrier, Bobby Bowden, they were like gods. And having a chance to kind of grow and play there, it was, we were the number 1 team in the country my freshman year. So it was definitely one of those childhood dreams. It was fortunate. And during that process, realized my body probably wasn't made for it. Ended up having 5 surgeries. It just got where I couldn't go lift at the gym anymore and had to figure out a way. And I think that, a lot of us athletes, we have that switch, right? And so football is one of those physical outlets where no matter what's going on at home or what your environment is, you've got this aggression that you have to get out of you. And football was an outlet. And so I found myself struggling afterwards. I was never like a bad guy, but like struggling. How do I get this out of me when I can't go lift and squat and deadlift and clean and hit people? Randomly found a amazing yoga teacher in LA and ended up studying yoga under him for 5 years and was fortunate to kind of merge what I learned from him with what I knew from fitness. And by a lot of mistakes, that's leads us here today to an online fitness company.
Wow. So I want to go back 1 second, and then I want to talk about the fitness company and some part of that journey. But you got to learn, it's my understanding, you played for 3 different coaches at the University of Florida.
Best training for ever to be an entrepreneur. 3 head coaches, I think 4 D coordinators, 4 different linebacker coaches. And so, and those are entrepreneurs listening to this, that like, I think one of the things that's an advantage to, while that completely sucked at the time, right? Like, every year you got to re-earn your job. Normally, if you get a starting job, unless you screw it up, it's yours, right? But I had a different coach every year, a different linebacker coach, where it's like he had his 5-star blue chip All-American that he wanted to get out there because it made him look better. So I not only had to be as good as the next guy, I had to be that much better. And I think from an entrepreneur, right, is like, we may have a bad quarter. You may have a bad 2 or 3 quarters, but like you don't sit around and wait. Like you get back to work the next day. Like, all right, like you watch film, screwed that up, learn from that, move forward. You don't lose sleep over it. Whereas I think a lot of times the conversations I've had for people that haven't had a lot of adversity early in life, it was like they have a bad couple quarters, a bad year or two, and it's just like they throw in the towel. And it's just like, I just kind of grew up with that. That's all I know.
Yeah. That's man, my next question was, how does that prepare you to be an entrepreneur? And I think you just answered it, which I didn't really think about that. The adversity that comes with sports and your ability to adapt to.
Well, throw in 5 surgeries, right? So not only do you have a new coach every offseason, now you got to go see the orthopedic surgeon, get cut on. And so you're missing most of spring ball and training, right? So you got not only overcome from that. And so it's just one of those things where it's just like you're up and down, and you learn to navigate that chaos, so to speak.
Yeah. And because I don't know that there's anything else that could better prepare you for it, because I didn't play sports, not at your level. I mean, I played a little bit of t-ball and maybe some high school.
But you were a hustler as a kid.
Yeah,
like you had to overcome adversity with the way you were raised. And I think that, I have a business degree from the University of Florida. And at the time, it may still be one of the top public business degrees. I use this much of it. What I learned is from the football field.
Wow.
Time management, how to overcome adversity, work with people that look, act, and believe differently than you. Like, these are all things that at the time was preparing me to be an entrepreneur that I didn't realize.
Yeah, totally. Look, that those are critical. I want to make sure that we capture those. So time management, you learn on the football field.
Yep.
Overcoming adversity, how to work with people who don't look, act, think like you do, think differently than you.
Yep.
Like, you think about the stuff that you learn in business school, and not to take away from anything that you learn in business school. There's a lot of theory and interesting things that come out of business school. But if you can't do those 3 things,
no,
you're not going to make it.
You can study supply and demand all you want, but until you get out there and start handing out flyers and having to hustle, they don't teach that.
So when did you start TMAC Fitness?
So I actually I was in finance as a stockbroker at Merrill Lynch, financial advisor, whatever you want to call it, for a little while, and then went out to LA with Merrill Lynch, and that was 2008, and that's when the economy collapsed, right?
Oh, yeah.
So all of us young brokers got laid off, and just kind of one of those random timings where it was like, if I just got to LA, like if I'd have been there for probably a year or two and had my experience, I probably just would have went with another firm back in finance, or if I'd have got married and had a kid, like I would have stayed in finance. I wouldn't have probably taken the risk. That's why I don't know how you handle the stress of a family and kids too. And so when I got laid off, like I said, I could go back to another firm in Florida. I was like, I just got to LA. This is new and exciting, and got to figure out how to pay the rent. And took all my suits to Goodwill, and a lady that cut my hair in Beverly Hills, I started training her for $50.
Huh. Wow. In Beverly Hills.
So her husband created that TV show Hard Knocks.
Okay.
And it was hilarious. Such a sweet couple. A Jewish couple. And I ended up going to having Shabbat dinner. So cultural from North Florida, and all of a sudden going to Friday night Shabbat dinner was a shit show. I was trying to explain to my family, it's like, Sundays, like church after Sunday. Same thing on Friday with the Jewish culture. So yeah, I mean, it was like I was broke as shit. I can remember you could go to Trader Joe's and get some white rice or brown rice and some ahi tuna steaks and eat dinner for about $2. $2 for about 19 cents.
Wow.
And while I was not making near the money I was in finance, I started to feel alive again. And that was the first time I'd felt alive since football. And I hadn't really thought about being an entrepreneur during that time period, because one of the disservices that college athletes have is all you know is that sport. And that's all you really have time for, to be honest, if you're going to excel at that level when you're competing for championships. But that transition period of like, what are you good at afterwards? You really don't have much experience, to be honest.
So you didn't grow up thinking I'm going to be an entrepreneur someday?
No, I thought I would be in North Florida, with about 8 kids by now. I had no intentions of I was never that small town guy that was like, I got to move to a big city and have these experiences. I mean, honestly, it was one of those things where it was like some more adversity in my personal life. Like a girl I dated for like 5 years, thought we'd probably get married, ended up having a bad breakup, and looked around and was like, I've really only been in North Florida my whole life. Like, how can I have another experience? And that was it.
And nothing like going to the West Coast and being out in LA and in Southern California.
Lot different in North Florida, for sure.
It's not like you moved to Nashville or Atlanta even as like the next tier.
No, it was always hilarious during the presidential races too, correct? Because it was like my hometown was 99.9% Republican, and then everything in LA was like 99.9% Democrat. So just to hear the conversations was hilarious.
How do you navigate that, right? As someone so this is a really interesting thing, because if someone meets you on the street and they hear your accent and they understand sort of who you are, where you came from on a cultural level, how do you navigate that when you go to a place like that's completely different than like, do you go there and try to learn more about why they believe what they believe? Do you go in or do you go and try to teach them why you believe what you believe? Or how do you integrate yourself in such a different?
Well, I think you do a good job of this, right? Like you obviously have a interracial family, like these things, like I think a lot of these things happen that wasn't aware of, right? So a couple things. One, I grew up in the hood, so to speak, in North Florida. So like I lived on quote unquote the wrong side of the railroad tracks where like all my white friends couldn't stay the night with me because of people getting, bad things happening. Yeah. And so all of my friends so like on the weekends, I played around and played football in the streets with all my black friends. And then on other times I was hanging out with all my white cousins that were country as hell. And so I think even as a child, I started to see good people and I started to see shitty people. Right. And then I think that I came to know one of the biggest things. And as you can tell, I'm not some over Bible belt and beaten person, but like I came to know Jesus Christ at 12 and I really fell in love with the Gospels and how to treat people that are different than you, treat people that don't treat you well. And so I think that, and then I got a chance to go play football at this private school where I went from this country bumpkin kid to now I'm going to school with like the Bush family. And people from all around the country all around the world would send their kids to this private school. And so I had to board there because I didn't have a way to school my freshman year. So I'm having dinner with kids from Russia, Germany, South America. And it's like, you start to see there's good folks everywhere and there's some shitty folks everywhere. Yeah. So I think that for me, whether I wasn't thinking it at the time, kind of prepared me for that jump to LA.
Yeah. I didn't see it until later in life for myself where, I grew up in the Section 8 apartment. I got special assignment to go to the school in the most affluent part of town. And so my friends at school lived a very different life than the friends that I, lived near. And, very different conversations even, for playing sandlot football by my house versus, hanging out with my buddies in South Tampa, it was a very different. And so at the time,
to give you a fun story of this. So like I would go, like the kids growing up in the one area of like that prep school were like playing flag football. And we grew up in my neighborhood playing black versus white football. And a knife get pulled on you. Your mom comes out in her nightgown with a broom, like, and they're all going to school together, right?
Crazy.
And so it's just different environments.
It's funny. I think that there's that's not a narrative that people talk about openly very much. Like it's not one that you hear people talking about. You and I, very white males, grew up in environments where we might have
dark during the summer.
I was the minority in my neighborhood, and that's not what I love about it is like it taught me adaptability. It taught me about, to your point, good people are good people. And so I think that it also prepares you to be an entrepreneur because then you understand diversity and you understand how to meet people where they are. And you understand that people are just people and we all bleed red.
Yep. And I think the one thing that most white people haven't experienced, I know you have as well, is they don't know what it's like to be the one person in the room of that color. Right. So like, I've dated African-American women. I know you were married to an African-American woman. Like all my buddies growing up were black. And then I went to Florida. All my teammates were black. Like there was roughly 80-something scholarships at Florida, 40-something on offense, 40 on defense. And of us 40-something on defense, my senior year, I was the only white guy on scholarship. And so I just think it's a different things you're aware of when you're in a room of just making sure everyone around you is comfortable. Like don't be you, but like just make sure everyone around you is like understands like what's going on.
Yeah. Look, even so, I grew up in Section 8 housing. I had this sort of like polarized life. I still recognize the privilege that comes with the color of my skin. And so you still have to acknowledge that and understand that when you enter different rooms and you're around different people.
In different situations.
Yeah.
I'd push on that other way too. In the sense of, right, like there's no question that it has its privileges 100%. Like we look at the history of this country. But I've also known, like, again, like when you are competing at that level, like if a guy like me misses a tackle, it's because you're a stiff, slow white boy. If an African-American teammate of mine misses a tackle, well, we can teach him that. So there's a little bit of that too, right? So now, granted, that's in the sports world. This is different than maybe trying to get a loan or capital. These things are real. But just my experience too is just like it cuts through I think going back into an entrepreneurship and working with different people is like when you have a good group of folks, regardless of where they're from or what they look like, and you're working towards the same mission, all you give a shit about is the next guy has my back. That's it. All the other, like what you believe in, what you look like, all the bullshit goes to the side.
There it is.
It's just like, can I count on the guy next to me to do his job?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
What you do on the weekends, I don't give a shit. But can I count on you to show up and execute at a high level? That's all I care. I've watched that go through people from complete opposite backgrounds become brothers for life. Like I'm still close to all my old teammates from 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. You just nailed it. I mean, that's it. Can you rely on the guy next to you? I mean, I think that is absolutely it. I was at a conference this weekend, and one of the things that came up was, who you do life with, who you're in business with, who is a part of your inner circle is just as important as what
get the who right
you're doing, and if not more important than what you're doing. Yep. And it started with who you go on vacation with is as important as where you go. And I'm like, man, that applies everywhere. And so I think you just sort of nailed that. Let me ask you this. So you to pivot, you start your business, you start training this first person for $50, and then you're sort of off to the races and you start to create this business. When did you first know you had a business?
I would say about 2 to 3 years in, right? So I took the Merrill Lynch private high net worth model and started, I learned from North Florida. And I realized when I was a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch, I worked just as hard as a $100,000 account as I did $1 million account. And one paid me, one didn't. And then I took that model to wealthy families in LA. And then once I, started making around like 6 figures in private training, I was like, okay, like I'll forget more about the stock market than I'll ever know as a trainer, because I grew up in that world, in the gym, racking the weights, that type of stuff. And I think that's when I knew I had a business. Now and then it was a big pivot in growth, I would say, that was just as hard going from the one-on-one to the digital side, because I'm not a tech guy and I've made a bad choice. One of the things I had to do over again was I would have found a better CTO for sure. I would have found like a better partner, CMO. I would have done a better job of building a team. Yeah. Whereas I've kind of like figured this out on my own, so to speak.
Yeah, but don't you have to be scrappy in the beginning? I mean,
you have to be. But I'm saying, like, in the ideal world, like, one, I had a great CMO to start with, right? We partnered up. She ran digital Nike, very talented. But one of the lessons I learned was they can't just have the right skill set. You have to be on the same mission and alignment and values. And we saw the company differently. Not that one was right, one was wrong. It was just like, not only do you need a good teammate, but you need to make sure you share the same values and are working towards the same goal. And so that's one of the things, looking back, I could have done a better job of.
Yeah. Yeah. So today, if we fast forward to today, how long has the business been up and running?
Probably 12 years now.
12 years.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
We're still here.
Yeah.
Still, the lights are still on.
Listen, I think I don't know the statistics. It's somewhere around 75% of all small businesses fail in the first few years. So if you can get past the first 5, there's hope. So congratulations on that. What do you, as you think about the future and as you think about how you are currently influencing fitness in people's lives, I guess, what about that? One, what about that fires you up? Like what like ignites you and gets you going about that one? And then 2, how do you see this next phase of TMAC Fitness? How does that look, and how do you feel like it takes it to another level of impacting people's lives?
Yeah, so I would say that the part that excites me and why I still do what I do over all these years is, the hat says, like, get your mind right every day. So like all of our workouts end with a meditation and prayer, which was inspired by Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I am God. And when I was creating this, a lot, and this is, again, 12 years ago, people were like, don't mix fitness with spirituality, religion. Those are 2 separate things. And I was like, I really don't have a desire to create a workout program that just does burpees. I love burpees. I believe in kicking your ass and working hard, but there's also way more to the conversation of wellness than just physical workouts. And so people thought I was crazy doing that. Now, that's what excites me, right? Because every day, like, you get a chance to start your day with a positive mindset or a negative, right? And so our role at TMAC Fitness is to help you be in a positive mindset. Now, we use fitness, we use yoga, we use HIIT training, we use kettlebell workouts, we have beginners, advanced, but they all give you a moment at the end to come back to your breath. And we tell people to, like, take a moment to honor your spiritual practice. This isn't like, you don't need to have my faith, I don't need to have yours, but take a moment for that to get your mind right each day. So that's what excites me on the work we do. And I think no matter 10 years from now, we're still going to be doing some capacity of helping people move their body and connect to the spiritual practice. The new side And I'm also excited about, but we're also kind of openly in the gray, and I'm kind of starting over again, which, as you know, is like fun and exciting, and you're tripping and falling again, is that we've now kind of entered more of the B2B space. And so we were able to land the city of Jacksonville's police and firefighters, which is about 5,500 employees. And I'm just stoked about that. Like every day, like my brother's a cop, like, you know, he went through a horrible divorce a couple years ago, really bad, kids involved. I watched how stressed out he was. And then, you know, he goes to work and then someone spits in his face and says, F off cop. Like, how do you not take that with you to work?
Yeah.
And I think that the privilege that we have and the opportunity we have is to help these police officers and firefighters and staff be in a positive mindset. And we call it lengthen the gap between stimulus and response. So if, Jason, you were just like, Todd, you actually sucked it up on this podcast today. This is why. As opposed to being like, you like, no, I didn't. Like, all right, like, what is he, like, this man cares about his business. I know him. How can I have done a better job? What can I learn from this? And take that moment and pause. And that applies to your family life. Yeah. You know, the wife saying something about the dishes is never about the dishes, right? Like, so that's the part of lengthening that gap between stimulus and response that when it comes to athletes, when it comes to police officers, I'm really excited about the work we can do in that space.
You know, I heard somebody say that you can't have a healthy body and be really screwed up in the head, or you can't have a healthy mind and then also, you know, be really screwed up physically.
Yeah.
And it not, I don't want to get into like a debate over this, but do you think it's true that like it just all works together? Like a healthy body sort of starts to equate to healthy mind and vice versa. And like it sort of holistically all works together. Like I don't know anyone that works on themselves physically who doesn't have some sort of something where they need to continue to work on their mind. So mind right to me is like the perfect intersection of health, mental and physical. They go together, in my opinion.
Well, if you work out, I can tell you right now, if you work out first thing in the morning and you meditate, you're more likely to eat a healthier breakfast, right? You've already knocked down a couple of dominoes to start your day, right? So that ties into the nutrition piece, right? Whereas if you don't work out first thing, you're not as invested in what you eat that day, right? And so I think that, you know, we try to solve that problem. Our main workout is a 20-minute total body workout. So we remove the excuse that people don't have time. And then we ask us, hey, while you're here, let's stretch, let's meditate real quick. You're in and out in 28, 30 minutes. And so I think we're trying to make that accessible to everyone. And so, yeah, I just think it all goes together. I think that, you know, for example, I have a cousin right now who's going through a really tough divorce, right? And if your faith and your workout routine is not on point when adversity, and look, adversity will happen. We could all be like living the high life right now and we get bad news from a doctor report soon or a family member. We all know that life's is valleys, right? And so if things are good, like get your shit together now because you know the valleys are going to come mentally, spiritually, right? And if things are bad, hey, brother, that's when you need that faith. That's when you need that family and friends. Like I said this morning, like carved out 2 hours of my morning, as we all know, is hard to do as an entrepreneur, just for fellowship. A bunch of guys went and did a cold creek plunge, meditated while we were there, shared each other what all was going on in their lives, had breakfast, coffee. Like those things take time. But again, who are you going to lean on when shit hits the fan?
Yeah.
Right? I can call on all of those guys. Like I'm going to Santa Barbara, like literally moving tomorrow, right? I don't know if shit's going to work out. Maybe it doesn't. But I can call every one of them and be like, hey, dude, I need a couch for 6 months. Got it taken care of.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing with you. Right. But it takes time to build relationships. And I think one of the things we have to be aware of in this kind of like biohacking world of entrepreneurship is that good things take time. People take time.
You know, that might be there's the meat of the whole conversation, I think, because it's something I'm really passionate about and I work hard and it's far from perfect. But one, the world of entrepreneurism can be very lonely. You know, if you're a CEO of one, or you've got a team of 10 or 20 or 50 or 500, it's still a lonely place to be sometimes. You're dealing with all the issues that go on. You're doing all the challenges. You internalize a lot of that. You don't pass it on to other people. And it can be a really lonely place. That said, I think it's at the core of our primal DNA that we have community and connection in our lives. Period. I think there was a recent longevity study that said the number one indicator of longevity in life is the quality of your relationships, particularly as you get older. And, you know, as we age, there's also statistics that show that we spend more time alone the older we get. So you have to make this conscious effort to create community and connection in your life. And I think oftentimes people find that in churches, people find that in small groups, people find that in fitness.
But think about one of the things that always stuck with me years ago when we met was, even though you're running this large company, right? I'm sure it's a big volume driven company. Your whole mission is to get people back to the table, right?
That's right.
To break bread together, right? So you can do all the business strategy you want, but the core thing is to break bread together with your fellow man, right? And I think that's the things that this society, like, go have dinner with someone and see how many times they look at their phone, right? Like, we've lost a little bit of that. And I think that ties into wellness. Like, each generation faces different challenges, right? Like, if you grew up in the 70s, you did so much manual labor, you probably didn't have to do a lot of HIIT training, right? But nowadays you sit all the time, so you probably need to do a little bit of HIIT or strength training, right, to burn more calories. Now, the new generation, to me, what I'm concerned about is that they're on their phones all the time.
Constantly.
There's no depth. There's no attention. Like, it's constantly on the phone. Have you read I just finished this great book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
No, but I'd love to read it.
Fantastic.
The Ruthless
Elimination of Hurry.
Okay. Do you know the author?
It's a pastor. He's a pastor out of Portland. But he was doing like 5 or 6 sermons on a Sunday, which is like an entrepreneurship life.
We'll throw it in the show notes and throw a link to it.
And he burned out, right? And he said it made him worse as a dad, a husband, a pastor. And so he basically goes through now how he's like constantly trying to remove things out of his life for fellowship.
You know, it's interesting because when you visit other countries, and listen, we got a lot to be proud of in the United States of America and a lot to be grateful for to be here. But when you go to other countries, particularly if you go to like a Europe, it doesn't matter. It could be any other country. I just find that balance in life is so much easier to come by than it is here. You know, if I'm, vacation's a little different, but whenever I'm on a trip somewhere and I'm able to observe another culture, everyone moves a little bit slower. And by and large, like, they prioritize things like dinner time with the family, like not occupying every single waking minute of their life. And the phone, while it's so powerful and gives us access to so much information, I don't know if the human mind was meant to have access to the entirety of the human conversation in real time. Like, you want to know why stress and anxiety are high? I think one of the reasons is because we have access to the entire human conversation in our back pocket. And I don't know that we're meant to do that. So slowing down is such a critical component. I work and fight my ass off to slow down and like try to have some intentional time with my family and kids, because if not, work and the demands of life will just swallow you whole.
I think we all struggle with this. I do as well, because I'm like you. I'm passionate about my work. I could do it 7 days a week. The thing that I'm becoming aware of as I get older is that everything has a cost. So let's say I want to buy a new car or get the bigger house or take this extra whatever. It comes at a cost. If that, at this age, I'm 41, if that cost for me is I don't get to once a week, twice a week, have fellowship with good people, brother, I don't need it.
Costs too high.
And I think being honest with that, right? So then you got tied to like a lot of people that burn themselves out in the entrepreneurship world because maybe they grew up without a lot of money and they need that Jaguar, they need that big house at the beach. But to me, that's the whole spiritual side of it, right? If you're not aligned with what's really going to uplift your soul, you're going to make all these decisions about your time that are going to ultimately, even if you have success, you've been climbing the wrong damn ladder. You know, and I think that that's the piece, again, that spiritual component of the wellness conversation is like, get your mind right, so to speak, before you start about this day. What are you willing to sacrifice for and why? And will that ultimately make you happy? Right? Like, everyone knows the study, like once you come across like north of $70,000 or more in salary, the level of happiness pretty much plateaus. Right? So how much more time, why can't we spend time 2 hours once a week to have fellowship with good people?
Is that how, would you say that's how you stay fresh, how you stay inspired, how you stay motivated to keep doing what you do?
I think it's a great reminder of why you do what we do, right? Because if I, like I always say, like I work out and if there's one thing I do a decent job of, there's a lot of things, most things I do wrong. If there's one thing I do a decent job is I always work out or cold creek plunge and meditate and pray before I look at social media or work emails. that helps remind me of what's important, right? So this morning was one of our dads that we were talking to. He's stressed. He's married, trying to provide for his kids. I can turn on my phone literally 1 minute after we have breakfast, and I've got a whole bunch of data on random emails about this, that. And it's easy as an entrepreneur to look at that as a random spreadsheet email. But forget that behind that Gmail account is a dad that's stressed out, that just wants to be a better dad. And so by doing that first thing in the morning, because I'm a selfish guy naturally, my default is like, let's grow your subscriber list. That's just an email, get another one. But no, like behind that email is a reminder that's a father.
Wow. What a really, really, like, when you think of it like that, the weight of that is really, it's heavy, but it's also noble, and it's a noble calling. And so I can understand why it continues to motivate you. I happen to have the good fortune of spending time with other CEOs of food companies earlier this week at a summit and a conference, and we were in the room with a billionaire.
It's a lot more zeros than I got.
Multi-billionaire, very, very, very successful, well accomplished. Yep. And it was really interesting because he was giving, just advice on like life. And this is a self-made billionaire. This isn't a inherited. This is like, son of Jewish immigrants who worked his way up and worked his ass off and built something really great. And he said, man, if you aren't passionate about what you're doing, you're never going to get there. Like, you're never going to experience success. And so I think that, like, the one thing that I hope we get across in these kinds of conversations is that there's a lot of passion in what we do. Mm-hmm. And at the core of it, it's like we're trying to better humanity, better ourselves, and understanding that real people exist on the other side of this, man. And we need a lot of help, physically and mentally. So I just appreciate that. I just appreciate the conversation. There's one thing I want to ask you before we jump, because you are in the fitness industry, and there are people that are busy dads like me who don't always have a chance to, spend an hour and a half in the gym, or, spend 2 hours doing this, that, or the other. Someone like me only has 15 or 20 minutes a day, or if that's all I can find to carve out in this moment. Is there one thing you would do? Like, if I need to hit a total body workout, what are the 3 movements that are just like non-negotiable, or what does that look like?
Yeah. So years ago, when I actually, after playing football at Florida, I played football in Europe. And what I learned over there was those people hardly worked out, but they were all lean, right? And you can nail the food conversation about that. But what I noticed on the movement side was they walked a lot. And so what we came with our program is, it's typically busy mom and dads who don't have time for the gym. We give them a daily 20-minute workout, beginner or advanced, total body workout, right? Gets the heart rate up. Like we talked about, finishes the meditation and prayer. And then there's a concept that we teach them when we onboard them called the 320 concept that I came up with. You basically, throughout your day, you have 20-minute windows. When you first wake up, lunch, and dinner, right? So we have them, hey, knock out your TMAC 20 workout first thing in the morning, get your day started, get your mind right. At lunch, you take 30 minutes with a friend, a work colleague, go for a walk, get in some movement then. And then when you get home, before or after dinner, take your dog for a walk with your spouse for another 20 minutes. And so, like, what I found is that if you can do those 3 things, it's really hard, like you said, for someone to carve out an hour and a half in their day, but they have little 20-minute windows, right? And so it's about taking advantage of those. And what I found is that if you do that with a good whole food diet, you're actually going to be burning calories all day, as opposed to just doing a workout and sitting the rest of the day. Yeah. So it keeps you burning calories throughout the day, and we call it like the 320 concept.
Love it. The 320 concept. And that seems really doable. Totally. When you break it down like that, it seems really, really doable. Todd, I'm going to miss you, man.
I'm going to miss you too. I got a little spot for you in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
Likewise, brother.
We'll come see you soon.
All right.
Thanks, man.